and welcome to Kitah. In this short lesson, we're going to learn a beautiful idea taught by the late great Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks about our Sidra, which explains the first two chapters of Chayei Sarah. Let's begin. Chayei Sarah begins with the death of Sarah, and of course Abraham is devastated. We're told that Sarah died age 127, and she died in Kiryat Arba, which is the region of Hebron. There, v'yavo Avraham lispod l'Sarah v'libkota. Avraham came to eulogize Sarah and to cry over her. But then Avraham had to find a place to bury Sarah. And for the majority of Perek Chaf Gimel, chapter 23, we read about the negotiations between Avraham and Bnei Chet, and specifically Ephron, who owned Ma'arat HaMachpelah, so he could purchase this cave to bury Sarah there. In fact, on 3 occasions in that chapter, we talk about how he desired to have what is called here an achuzat kever, a grave that he could hold on to, which I understand to mean a grave that was going to be part not just of the resting place of Sarah, but part of the Jewish legacy where Avraham was later to be buried and many of the other patriarchs and matriarchs. The term achuzat kever or achuzat kaver repeats itself on 3 occasions in the chapter. You can see I've highlighted it here. But what's interesting is there is a link word between this chapter and the following. And that link word is kach, take. Avraham says to Ephron, take my money so I can buy this place to bury my beloved wife. Now the reason I mention that is because in Perek Chaf Daled, chapter 24, we read a very different story. The word kach, or different versions of it, tikach v'lakachta, repeats itself many times. But rather than talking about death and burial, rather than talking about the purchase of land and a resting place for Sarah, it talks about the marriage or the prospective marriage between Yitzchak and Rivka, where Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, is sent to find a prospective wife for his master's son. And there he encounters Rivka by the well. You may know the story. And through the conversations he had with Abraham before he went to encounter Rivka, and during that conversation the word kach is used, take, take. And in fact our rabbis say we learn a profound lesson. Through the word kach used in terms of Ephron, and through the word kach used in terms of marriage, we learn that marriage is affected through the transfer of money. That's why, for example, at a chuppah, a groom gives a bride a ring. Avraham gave Ephron money, and he purchased the Ma'arat HaMachpelah, and a marriage begins with a transfer of marriage, not to buy a person, but instead to effect a covenant between two people, that being the covenant of marriage. However, the question that Rabbi Sacks asks is a profound one, which is, why does the Torah spend so long talking about these 2 stories? I mean, these are 2 very long chapters, one about negotiations, about purchasing a piece of land, one about the conversations that take place regarding the prospective marriage of Yitzchak to Rivka. And here he answers a profound lesson. But in order to explain it, we need to go back in time. God told Abraham, you will have the land. And God told Abraham, you will have children and grandchildren. And yet, when does this story take place? Let's now see the words of Rabbi Sacks. Throughout the story of Abraham and Sarah, God had promised them 2 things, children and a land. The promise of the land is repeated no less than 7 times. The promise of children occurs 4 times. Abraham is told his children will be a great nation. There'll be as many as the dust of the earth and the stars of the sky. Yet despite this, when Sarah dies, Abraham has not a single inch of land that he can call his own. And he only has 1 child who will continue the covenant, that is Yitzchak, currently unmarried. Neither promise has been fulfilled. Hence, says Rabbi Sacks, the extraordinary detail of the 2 main stories in Chayei Sarah, the purchase of land and the finding of a wife for Yitzchak. And he says, and there is a moral here. And the Torah slows down the speed of the narrative. Isn't that a beautiful way of putting it? As if to say the Torah takes its time to explain these two stories, so we will not miss the point. And what is the point of these two chapters of Prakim Chaf Gimel and Chaf Daled, chapters 23 and 24? God promises, but we have to act. God promised Abraham the land, but he had to buy the first the field. God promised Abraham many descendants, but Abraham had to ensure that his son was married and that he would ultimately have Jewish grandchildren. I think that's a majestic lesson from Parshat Chayei. These lengthy chapters are there to teach you a message. Yes, God wants things for you, but it's up to you. And so we learn about the hard negotiations with Ephron, the huge amount of money Abraham pays, the lengthy considerations and debates in terms of the appropriateness of which type of wife should be suitable for Yitzchak, and the conversation between Eliezer and Rivka, to teach us that simple but exquisite message. God promises, but we have to act. Shabbat Shalom.